Welcome back to the channel, you guys. Today is a full tutorial on how to make the Kennedy bag. If you want to make this yourself, you can purchase this pattern down in the description. Super minimal in terms of materials and tools. We don't have any hardware on here. Super easy, so let's get right into it. Okay guys, let's get right into it. We're gonna talk about the tools that you're gonna need for this little project. Honestly, super minimal, super easy. I'm gonna show you the tools you need and also some tools that are optional. So first off, you're gonna need a knife. Everyone's got an X-Acto knife laying around the house. You need some tape to tape your pattern to the leather. You need some thread, a couple of needles, a hole punch if you're gonna stitch with holes instead of a pricking iron, and then a quarter. This is gonna help us shape our strap ends, and then a straight edge. This one's 18 inches. You might want one a little bit longer because of one of the pieces, but this is gonna work just fine. So that's like the essential tool set right there. And then optional, we have an edge beveler, we have a edge slicker. So this is just if you wanna finish your edges. It's not something you have to do. Kind of depends on the leather that you're using, but definitely gonna show you how to do those things. And then a pricking iron if you don't want to use the holes. I prefer pricking irons over holes, but this is a great way to get started. They're much easier to stitch through, but holes with pricking irons are gonna last a lot longer in terms of just the overall construction of your bag. So just keep that in mind, but you can always go this route. So that's the tool set. The next step, we're gonna go ahead and cut out the pattern before we put it on the leather. So guys, this is the leather I'm gonna be using. It is 5-ounce Butero. It's in the mahogany color. You can use any leather you want for this project, truly, but I prefer something stiffer, so it's firm temper leather is best. This is vegetable tanned, it's full grain. If you use like a softer chrome tanned leather, just know that the bag is gonna be kinda, it's gonna kind of sink in on itself. I think for this specific aesthetic, something really firm works better. So this is, 5-ounce Butero. I recommend 5 ounces and up for something like, well, not 5 ounces and up, 5 ounces to like maybe 7. I wouldn't go thicker than that, but you always can. Try it out. That's what you have, that's what you have. So that's the material we're using. The next step is gonna be cutting out each piece of the pattern before we put it on the leather. Okay guys, now we're just gonna cut out the pattern. I'm gonna show you how to do it exactly. So when you get your pattern, this is what it's gonna look like. We'll start with this one here. Essentially, you just wanna cut a little bit outside each black line because we're actually gonna tape our pattern down because this helps us be really precise when we're cutting out the leather. So I just recommend, these margins don't really matter too much. You just wanna leave, I don't know, maybe about a 1/2 inch. Obviously you can go thinner on your margins if you don't wanna waste extra leather, because this is all gonna be wasted in the end because it's gonna have tape on it. Now you'll see these rectangles here. It says cut these rectangles to tape to the leather. The reason we do that is if we cut this out and we tape it down, then when we cut the edges, the pattern's not gonna get loose. My tape is too strong. It'll actually hurt the finish of the leather. But if you use like a painter's tape, it won't do that. So I'm not gonna cut these out. You totally can. This is just to make sure the pattern's nice and secure, but it's not a must in the process. All right, so for some of these pieces, everyone just has a regular printer at home. You can always have a local print shop print these on solid pieces of paper, but because they have margins on them, we have to cut off those margins. You wanna be really precise here. So you wanna line up the edge of your ruler right to the edge of the content, and then make your cut. Okay, so you only have to do that on one side. That way you have a little bit of a margin here to tape down like this. So that's what we're gonna do after we cut out the pieces. But essentially those letters just line up, and you just make sure these lines line up and the holes line up. You'll be good to go. Okay guys, so this is what it looks like after you've cut out the basic pieces. Again, remember, look how I left a little margin here on both sides of these. That way I can overlap this when I'm taping, just like that. What you wanna do is put these two pieces aside because these don't actually need any tape. Then grab these pieces and you just wanna get a little piece of tape to connect where the letters are. And just a little note, you might have to mess with your printer settings to get things to line up like this. It can be really frustrating. Adobe can always, it can cause problems sometimes, but be patient with it or send it off to your local print shop. You can have this whole thing printed for like $2 on a big sheet of paper. So we're just gonna grab little pieces here. I recommend putting it on the side without the margin. And then you just have to be careful and take your time. Make sure the letter lines up. Make sure the holes line up. It's pretty good. Just a couple more pieces to secure things. And then we'll attach it to the leather after this step. Okay guys, so now we have our basic pattern out on the leather. Just want to get the layout right, make sure you got the good parts of the leather you're cutting from. One note real quick, you'll see on your pattern this part F strap end. Set this to the side. This is what we're going to use to just put our holes in the end of our strap. But you will want to cut out your little keepers. The first thing I like to do is lay this out like this and then cut the leather into smaller chunks so that it's easier to work with. So now that we have like a basic line there, I'm just gonna cut right across the top of this. I'm actually gonna get a heavier duty knife. You can do it with this, but this thing for whatever reason, well, let's just see. It's fine. Nothing like a new X-Acto blade, very sharp. So I'm gonna set this to the side. And then so you want to make sure that you leave enough margin for the tape to stick something, like for the tape to have something to stick to. There we go. Again, this is going to pull up the finish a bit on my leather, but this is all being cut off, so it really doesn't matter. When you're taping down, you want to make sure that you at least go over the stitch holes. You'll see why here in a little bit. It just makes them a little bit more secure. You essentially just want to make sure there's tape on all four sides and over any stitch holes. The more secure all this taping is, the easier it is going to be to cut everything. Whoop. A little static electricity right there. Okay guys, we want to make sure that we punch all of the holes out before we cut all of the lines, just because as soon as we cut all the lines, this pattern's gonna come off of the paper and we're gonna have to like hold it in place while we're punching all these holes. It's a big pain. So definitely punch your holes first and then we'll get our straight edge and we'll cut out the shape of our bag. So again, you can use pricking irons for this. This is a 2mm punch. That's what the holes are set up as. You can go a little bigger, 2.5 if you want. Just know that the bigger you go, the more likely you'll pop a stitch. And being set at 2mm, it's just like really easy to line up because it's the exact same size as this hole punch. This takes a little while. It's a little tedious, but it's actually kind of satisfying. And then you'll just have like all of this hole punch confetti when you're done, which I've always thought would be cool to do something with. Thought about getting like a whole bunch of it and putting it in a bowl, and it'd be like what do they call that? Like potpourri, like a little leather potpourri. Soak it in like leather scented oil. I don't know. Always trying to reuse stuff. There's only 107 right here, and 107 right there, and 107 right there, and 107 right there. There's only like 400 holes. Okay guys, so in this piece we have all of the holes cut out. So now we're gonna go ahead and cut. So what I recommend is cutting all the straight lines first, and then we'll worry about the radii. I think that's the plural. So just wanna barely see that black line. And then you wanna try to always have pressure on the ruler. Sorry, to have your blade in between your two points of pressure. So you don't want to start to cut up here. You always want to have the blade in between your two fingers. So we're going to start up here. If you don't do that, the ruler can just pivot just a bit. Okay guys, before I cut this last piece of tape off, I want to show you how I cut, the radius. So basically, you just want to keep your edge of your knife on the outside of the black line and just pull straight. You're just doing these little tangents, if you remember geometry. And you just try and do little cuts, just barely touching that black edge. You don't have to do it this way. You can do it in one motion, but especially for beginners, this is just the easiest way to get a nice curve. Again, you're just kissing that black line in like little sections. You can just do a little sanding, but you can see it's a pretty good curve. Could be better, but we can just kind of smooth that out. Obviously, the sharper your knife, the easier all of this gets. You also want to try and keep your knife blade as perpendicular to the cutting surface as possible. You don't want to bend it this way or that way, because then the edge of your leather will have kind of a camber to it. Now, because this is taped down, this is going to be, I can't really do this yet, but I'll show you another way we can do this. If you've got a paperweight lying around, you can use that. I use this little mini anvil just to make sure nothing's gonna move. And then you just try and keep your fingers close to the edge so you can make sure there's pressure putting the paper to the leather. If you need to reline up your paper, just make sure all of the little holes are visible through. That way you know you're spot on. Obviously there's other ways to do this. I have one of these where you can kind of just use that as a guide, or you can use like the edge of a can of glue or whatever, like anything with a radius that matches pretty much what you're doing, you can do. But because we have these punches already out, it has to be pretty precise to keep this margin the same. But just because I do one thing one way doesn't mean there's not 100 other ways to do it. So just keep that in mind. All right, so there's our first piece. I'll go through and cut everything else out. Talking about the tabs and the closure, what you want to do after you've punched out your holes is you want to just cut the straight lines. Once you've cut your straight lines, this is why we have a quarter. We can actually do what I was talking about with this tool here, but I size these up to be a quarter because everyone's got a quarter lying around. And you do the same thing, you just make sure it's nice and lined up and then use that as a guide and then just cut little slivers off bit by bit. That way you get a really good round end. That'll make your piece look much more finished. We got all the pieces cut out, all the holes punched, just about ready to stitch. But I'm gonna finish up these edges a little bit. This is an optional step. So I get a little sandpaper and just try and smooth out that curve a little bit more. Again, totally optional. However you want it to turn out is totally fine. It can be a little bit more crafty around the edges, but we'd like a more finished look. I wouldn't finish the edges where the stitching's going yet, because when we put the gusset on, there'll still be some trimming to do possibly. If we didn't get their holes punched perfectly centered, you'll have to trim a little bit. I'll show you how to do that. But you can finish where there's not stitching. So we'll do the keepers and we'll do a little bit of that edge. So first, yeah, just sanding a bit. Then we get our edge beveler. We want to do both sides. Again, with the edge beveler, you're at a 45-degree angle this way and a 45-degree angle this way, or about 30. You just have to find where you find that friction. And if you can go slow enough to do this in one piece, you'll have a better finished edge. You won't have starts and stops. But if you don't do it in one piece, that's perfectly okay. It's much easier to do with a sharp edge beveler. This is a Palo Santo, big fan of their stuff. So there's one. The back side, it's hard to do in one piece because the grain's not as tight, but it's still doable if you take your time. Oh, I slipped. That's all right. So I would do that to both. And then for the slicking the edges, you can do a lot of different things. You can use some burnishing cream. I have this one in like a little roller. You can use water, you can use beeswax, you can even use your own spit. I've been known to lick a lot of these edges. It just seems to work really, really well. But since we have it here, we're just gonna put a thin layer on. And we go with our wood slicker, and we just rub it in and burnish it up. So to clean up the excess, we just grab some canvas and we rub, smooth everything out. Forgot to mention, this is a size 1 edge beveler. I like a really subtle bevel. You could go as high as a 2 here, but I really wouldn't. With 5-ounce leather, I'd go with a 1. Okay guys, we're all ready to stitch. I suggest you do the keepers and the tab first, because eventually you won't be able to get inside the bag as easy to get to it. If you'd like, you can hold these things in place with some double-sided tape or a little bit of glue. Definitely makes your life a little bit easier. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna stick these down with a little bit of double stick tape, and then we'll start stitching. Okay guys, I have mine in a stitching pony here. You don't have to do it this way. I will show you how to do it without one. It's just, for me, it's so tedious to stitch without a stitching pony, but sometimes when you're getting started, you don't have one. But I'm gonna show you how to stitch in the stitching pony first. So if you don't know how to saddle stitch, I have a full video on it. You wanna make sure that you've threaded both ends of your thread. Go in the hole, make sure that you even up the threads so you got the same amount on each side. You always start with the left side, you put it through, you make a T by going under that needle, pull the thread out of the way, turn your T 90 degrees, so you're putting the other needle back in now, and then pulling tight. That's one way to do it. A lot of beginners do it a little bit different. They'll put both needles in the hole at the same time, push them through, and then just go like that. That's one way to do it as well. There's really no right or wrong way to do it. There's a traditional way to do it, which is what I'm showing you. When you go underneath, make a T, turn it back through. But again, I have a whole video on how to saddle stitch. I'm gonna put the card up in the corner, or the link to that. Super, super easy. Now I'm gonna show you if you don't have the stitching pony. So pretty much you're just gonna put your needle in, pull it all the way through. Now I'm grabbing the other needle from the other side and going back through that same hole and pulling through. The reason why this is so finicky is because I'm having to hold the leather back and forth with my two hands, and it just gets for me, really annoying. I built my own stitching pony early on, so this has never been an issue. If you want to build your own stitching pony, I also have that video. You can make one for about 20 bucks, or you can buy a cheap one on Amazon for 20 bucks. So now we're on the last hole. We're gonna stitch it as normal. Okay, and then we're gonna back stitch. So I'm gonna go through the second to last hole, or the penultimate hole. Go through. One thing you wanna just be aware of is not piercing your thread when you come back through. You'll be able to tell if you go through the fibers of the thread. Right now I'm underneath it, so that's good. So I go back twice, and then I put this needle in, just the one needle, pull it to the back, and then I will clip the threads about at 1/8 of an inch. And then I will, whoops, excuse me. And then I just burn these little edges. And it creates a little mushroom cap right there. The one thing I'll say, no matter what method you're using, just make sure you're consistent, because then your threads will look consistent. If you use the same method throughout and move your hands in the same order, then your stitches will look very uniform. So now we're gonna put the gusset on. This seems intimidating, but it's really easy because we have all of our holes already punched. We do wanna make sure we have enough thread. So how do you do that? You wanna take the length of your stitching piece, which is this gusset, and you wanna multiply that by at least 3 and even 4, just to make sure you don't run out. So you can just lay this piece down on the table and then just count out 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, this will be easier if you have a stitching pony, but obviously you just want to line up the first hole with the first hole. Make sure that the bag makes sense in your mind. Here's the top of the bag, here's the top of the gusset. And you just wanna make sure those are lined up. And you just start, if you're gonna do it by hand without a stitching pony, you just start to loop, but we're gonna put it in here. The cool thing about a stitching pony is it will actually kind of hold these two pieces together in place. There's nothing different about stitching the gusset on. You're just making sure that you're going in the right hole. The corner seems like it would be tricky, but it's not, and I'll show you more when we get there. So I reached the corner here. You may be wondering, what am I gonna do? The gusset goes straight, this makes a curve. So all you do is pull this gusset out like this, and now you have everything lined up. And you just have to go hole by hole. Pull it tight. You just have to keep lining it up as you go. It's really not that hard. But all it is bringing the gusset out, making it curve, and then it's gonna line up just right. That's the beauty of punching all your holes out beforehand. Just makes this kind of like putting together a big jigsaw. Super simple. Finished the first part of the gusset. Now we're gonna throw the front panel on, and then we'll almost be done. We just gotta put the strap on, and I'll show you how to do that at the end. So we finished stitching, closed it up. Just wanna show you guys how to trim the edges a little bit if you want to. There's a number of ways to do this. The easiest way is to take it to a belt sander and just run it around the edges. But a lot of you probably don't have a belt sander, I'm guessing. So the reason why they don't line up perfectly sometimes is just depending on how accurate you are with punching the holes. So what I tend to do is I grab a really sharp X-Acto knife and I rest it on one flat edge of the leather. Definitely don't try this without a very sharp X-Acto knife. But I'm basically just using the lower layer as a guide. So that's much more flush, and then I'll come back with some sandpaper and sand that off. You can take as much or as little time as you want with the edge finishing process. Obviously, the more you sand and the more you progress through the grits, the smoother your edges will get. Now that we got the bag all stitched together, we need to make the shoulder strap for it. I'm gonna make one without a buckle because I'm assuming you guys don't have one. If you wanna put a buckle on, that's really easy. You can just follow my belt making video on how to do a belt buckle, or just any buckle really, just it can scale to size, anything you want. So we're just gonna do a standard strap. I'm not gonna give you a length because that's up to you with where you want it to sit on your body. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll make it without a strap cutter just because I'm gonna assume you guys don't have one. But if you do, you definitely want to get one, or if you have one, use it, way easier. If you don't know how to use this, you can also watch my belt making video, teach how to cut straps there. It's pretty straightforward strap making. You just got to make sure that the ruler or the straight edge doesn't move. All the tabs and stuff are the same width, so we're gonna use this to get our width. There we go, one strap. And so for punching out the holes on the end, I have these little leather pens that just do a tiny bit of silver gel. Use our quarter again for this step. You can bevel and finish this strap just like we did the keepers, if you'd like. All right guys, so we just want to line up the end of the strap with the pre-cut holes we did on the gusset. Now, obviously, there's lots of options you could do here. You could loop this over and put a D-ring and some trigger snaps. We're just showing you the simplest way to do this. Feel free to modify this bag however you please. This is going to be a little finicky stitching this on, but with a little bit of patience, it's no big deal. Finding the easiest thing to do is put it through the front first, pull it tight, get it out of the way, and then find which hole that thread's coming out of. All right, there's one side. We're just gonna repeat the same step on the other. All right guys, gonna finish up the bag with just a little bit of a polish. This is our own leather balm. It's all natural. We sell it on our website if you want it. Saddle soap works great too, or a little neat's foot oil. But I just do a light coat with some canvas. I put a little bit of leather inside the bag just to have a little bit of resistance here while I polish it up. This will add a little bit of water resistance and just moisturize the leather and give it a nice faint sheen. All right, there you have it, you guys, the Kennedy bag, fully stitched. If any of you decide to make this, please tag me in any photos, either on Reddit or Instagram. I'd love to see what you make. We really appreciate you coming to the channel, watching. Please like and subscribe. And if you want to support us further, go ahead and buy this pattern or buy a wallet or a belt or something from OpenSea Leather at osleather.com. Thanks so much and stay tuned for more tutorials. Now that we're done with the bag, we got to cut our, start over. The pattern for this bag is down in the link. The pattern is down in the link. Down in the description. But this takes, what do I want to say there? I need to think what I want to say there.